In Christopher Nolan's film Tenet, characters manipulate entropy to reverse the flow of time. A fired bullet is unfired, ripping out of a wall and slamming backward into the chamber of a gun. It is a stunning visual because it breaks the most basic rule of our physical reality. We experience time as a strictly one-way street, where entropy always increases, and shattered things do not magically reassemble themselves. But while physicists debate whether time travel is theoretically possible, biologists have been trying to answer a remarkably similar question. Can a living species actually put evolution in reverse? For over a century, the reigning consensus was no. A principle known as Dallow's law states that once a species evolves complex traits to adapt to a new environment, it cannot revert to its past form. In biology, rewinding the clock was supposed to be impossible. To test this strict boundary, biologists Philip Service and Henrique Teotonio placed highly evolved fruit flies into a biological time machine. They took populations of Drosophila that had adapted to unique, high-stress conditions for generations and returned them to the exact laboratory environments of their distant ancestors. The results were immediate and striking. The flies rapidly shed their new adaptations and reacquired the specific physical traits of their ancestors, right down to their developmental speed and their resistance to starvation. This chart shows the possible evolutionary trajectories for populations returning to an ancestral environment. Looking closely at curves C and D, we can trace these populations abandoning their derived states and descending back into the shaded band representing the ancestral condition. The physical bodies of the flies had undeniably reverted, but the underlying data presented a challenge. It wasn't clear if the DNA had actually rewound to its original sequence, or if the genome had simply invented a new set of instructions that only looked like the past. In 2009, Teotonio's team finally secured the sequencing technology to look under the hood and read the genetic code of these reverse-evolved flies. What they found was confusing. While the physical traits matched the ancestors with near-perfect accuracy, the allele frequencies, the specific variants of the genes themselves, stalled out, reverting by only about 50%. The immediate conclusion was that 50 generations simply wasn't enough time, or that the genome had become entangled. The assumption was that the complex genetic architecture built up over recent generations was actively preventing a full return to the ancestral code. The data suggested that outward physical appearance is an unreliable narrator for genetic truth. The genome seemed stuck in the present, unable to fully shed its recent history, even as the flies' bodies mimicked the past. A few years later, evolutionary biologists Molly Burke and Joseph Graves investigated this paradox using an enormous, decades-long radiation of outbred Drosophila populations. By analyzing these massive populations under specific conditions, they observed complete 100% reversal. The flies reverted their genomic profile to match perfectly. To understand why, we have to look at the difference between uniform clones and sexual populations. A population of identical clones adapting to a new environment must wait for a brand new, random mutation to appear to survive. Outbred sexual populations rely on standing genetic variation. This means they maintain a vast library of ancient, dormant genetic variants, or alleles, preserved within their diverse gene pool. When the environment shifts back to an ancestral state, the population doesn't have to wait for random mutations. The required genetic instructions are already there, acting as an entropy-inverting turnstile ready to be reactivated. This proves that large, diverse populations do not have to invent a new genetic path to survive historical environments. They simply retrieve the correct instructions from their own DNA. Burke and Graves' discovery changes the way we think about the speed and direction of adaptation. Evolution isn't necessarily a one-way march toward new traits. It's a far more flexible process. Genetic history is not simply burned away or overwritten when a species adapts to something new. Instead, those old genetic pathways are continuously archived within the population's diversity. High genetic diversity acts as an evolutionary insurance policy. If an environment regresses or becomes hostile, a species with a rich gene pool can survive those shifts without relying on the sheer luck of a new mutation. In Tenet, the ultimate tactical advantage goes to the operatives who can navigate a dangerous world in both temporal directions. Armed with standing genetic variation, outbred populations possess a similar advantage. They are not trapped by the arrow of time, nor are they strictly bound by Dallow's law. Highly diverse populations have the biological machinery to charge forward into novel environments, or seamlessly invert their entropy to reclaim their ancestral past.